What happens when America's most talked about former royal sits down with one of television's most trusted journalists? At first, it looks like a polished morning show segment, bright smiles, polite exchanges, and a studio washed in CBS's orange and blue glow. But beneath the calm, sparks wait. With each question, the temperature rises. Meghan's replies sharpen, and Gayle's patience is tested. By the time the conversation derails, viewers are left stunned, wondering if they've just witnessed one of morning TV's most dramatic confrontations. The CBS studio buzzed with its usual energy. Crew moved quietly in the background, cameras slid into position, and giant screens glowed with a familiar backdrop millions associate with their mornings. Gayle King, elegant and poised, sat with notes neatly arranged. Her calm, commanding voice anchored the broadcast. Across from her, Meghan Markle navy blazer over a cream blouse. Hair in soft waves sat upright and deliberate, exuding control and confidence. To the casual viewer, she looked like the polished guest ready to promote her latest philanthropic project. "Meghan, thank you for being here," Gayle began warmly, her smile radiating across the studio. "I know you've been working on a new initiative, and our viewers are excited to hear more." Meghan returned, the smile calculated, precise, as if rehearsed. "It's always a pleasure, Gayle," she said, voice silky and polished. "This initiative brings global awareness to issues people often ignore. It's about using my platform to highlight what truly matters." Gayle nodded. "That sounds powerful. What personally inspired you?" For a moment, Meghan's tone softened compassion, a desire to make the world better. The audience nodded along. It felt uplifting, humanizing, hopeful, just as producers planned. Then Gayle, seasoned and steady, shifted slightly. The smile stayed. Her eyes sharpened. She leaned in her tell before deeper waters. "Meghan," Gayle said smoothly, "you've spoken about your personal truth, but some question the consistency of your story. For instance, when you told Oprah you and Harry had a private wedding before the official one. The Archbishop later contradicted that. How do you reconcile the difference?" The air changed. Meghan's smile tightened just a flicker, enough for viewers to notice. She adjusted her sleeve. "Well, Gayle," she said, cooler now, "it's interesting how people fixate on technicalities over the emotional reality. What Harry and I experienced was sacred. Whether others nitpick details doesn't change our truth." Gayle gave a measured nod. "I understand. But some might say truth should be universal, not just personal, especially on a public stage." A faint, dismissive laugh. "With respect, Gayle, you weren't there. Neither was the Archbishop in every moment of our private lives. It's easy to comment from the outside, but you didn't live it." The morning show gloss began to evaporate. Meghan's tone, a notch higher, carried a quiet arrogance. Gayle's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. Still, Gayle pressed with grace. "Fair point. But another example. You've said you received no media training before royal life. Yet palace insiders claim there were extensive briefings. Would you say they're lying?" Meghan didn't soften. Her eyes narrowed. "Palace insiders," she echoed with a trace of disdain. "Anonymous voices who built careers defending an outdated institution. Forgive me if I don't validate their narratives. I lived it, Gayle. I know the truth." There it was again, the edge, the tone that placed her above the questions, above accountability. Meghan wasn't just answering. She was dismissing, brushing aside Gayle's words like an insect's buzz. Gayle inhaled slowly, expression neutral, years of live TV, teaching patience and calm under fire. Inside, the first sparks of tension flared. She glanced at the clock segments still to fill and wondered if this was about to become more than the producers had planned. The audience sensed it too. The polite applause had stopped. Viewers at home would later call the shift palpable, feeling that something was about to snap. Gayle drew her pen across her notes, steadying her rhythm. She had more questions once that couldn't be avoided. Meghan leaned back slightly, chin lifted, her posture daring Gayle to press on. The calm before the storm had passed. The storm was beginning. The studio lights seemed hotter. Perhaps it only felt that way. Meghan sat with the poise of a duchess, fingers loosely laced, chin tilted just so. Gayle King kept her practiced warmth, but steel lay beneath it. She knew the energy had changed. This was no longer just Meghan's philanthropic work. It was a test of patience, and Gayle intended to hold her ground. "So, Meghan," Gayle began softly, choosing her words with care. "In your Oprah interview, you said you felt isolated and unsupported during your pregnancy. You even said you were denied mental health assistance. Some former palace staff insist resources were available. How do you respond?" Meghan's eyes hardened, though her faint smile remained. "Gayle, it's easy to rewrite history when you haven't lived my life. People act as though they know what happened behind closed doors. I was there. I was the one left to suffer. If others claim otherwise, perhaps they're more interested in protecting the monarchy than telling the truth." Her tone was sweet, edged with poisonal humility, only condescension. Gayle nodded politely and pressed. "I understand, but when multiple accounts exist, people question accuracy. They want consistency." Meghan gave a sharp, almost theatrical laugh. "Consistency. Gayle, the only consistent thing has been the smear campaign against me. I've dealt with lies, distortions, and half-truths for years. Expecting me to explain myself to anonymous sources is laughable. Perhaps they should whisper less to the press and reflect more on their own failures." A stir moved through the audience. These weren't the polished PR answers of a morning show. They were biting and haughty, disdain dripping as if accountability itself were being scolded. Gayle inhaled, steadying herself. Training said stay composed, but the smug dismissal pressed on her patience. She straightened her cards, buying a beat. "All right," Gayle said, calm but firmer. "Let's pivot. You've said you stepped away from royal life for privacy, yet you've written books, filmed documentaries, and given high-profile interviews. How do you reconcile the desire for privacy with such a public presence?" Meghan's smile turned icy. "Gayle, privacy doesn't mean silence. It means control over what we share. Refusing to be silenced by the palace or the media doesn't forfeit my right to privacy. Frankly, I find the question insulting. I don't need to justify my choices to anyone, least of all critics who thrive on hypocrisy." The audience murmured again. This was no longer a guest promoting a cause. It was a woman on the offensive, swatting down every question as beneath her. Gayle tilted her head, still measured. "I'm not trying to insult you, Meghan. I'm trying to understand the balance you describe." Meghan's reply was swift, cutting. "Then perhaps try harder, Gayle, because implying that my husband and I don't deserve to tell our story is absurd. The fact I must explain this at all shows how entrenched the bias remains." Gasps rippled through the studio. The arrogance in the tone was unmistakable, now less answering than lecturing. Dismissing, towering over the questions as if Gayle were on trial. A flicker crossed Gayle's eyes, the first crack in her serene mask. She pressed her palms together, voice even but edged with steel. "I hear you, Meghan, but I also think viewers want clarity. These aren't just criticisms from the palace. These are questions people genuinely have." Meghan leaned in slightly, posture regal, voice weighted with superiority. "And maybe the public should stop expecting me to spoon-feed answers to every petty doubt. My life isn't a public court case. I don't owe palace staff, critics, or even viewers an explanation for my choices." The words hit with a thud. Even Gayle seemed momentarily taken aback. The audacity was breathtaking. For a beat, the control room considered cutting to commercial. But the producers knew what they were seeing. Television lightning. Gayle adjusted her glasses. Her voice stayed calm, now edged with steel. I respect that you feel you don't owe explanations. But when you make powerful public statements that shape how millions view one of the world's oldest institutions, people will ask questions. That's not bias. That's journalism. Meghan tilted her head, lips curving into a smirk. And I respect that you think you're doing journalism, Gayle. But let's be honest, this isn't about truth. It's about entertainment. And if what you wanted was a spectacle, congratulations. You've got it. The audience gasped. For a heartbeat, the studio fell silent. Gayle's expression remained composed, though the fire in her eyes showed thinning patience. She'd interviewed presidents, survivors, world leaders. Never had she been so openly condescended to on her own set. Still, her voice held steady. We're here for an honest conversation, Meghan. That's all. Meghan leaned back, arms crossed, smirk intact. Then perhaps learn to ask honest questions instead of parroting palace spin. The insult hung heavy. Gayle's composure held, but the storm was building. Viewers could feel it. The studio audience shifted uneasily. The controlled Gayle King was nearing her limit, while Meghan, oblivious to the rising tension, kept playing the untouchable Duchess. The cracks were no longer hairline, they were widening, and something was about to snap. The studio slid into an uneasy rhythm. Every question from Gayle was calm, measured, even gentle. Every answer from Meghan was sharp, dismissive, or laced with superiority. It was chess, but Meghan refused the rules, knocking pieces over whenever cornered. Seasoned as she was, Gayle held her composure, though inside, her patience wore thin. She'd faced presidents handling tough questions with more grace. CEOs and celebrities had bristled under scrutiny. Meghan's smug condescension was in a class of its own. So, Meghan, Gayle said softly, choosing each word. You've often spoken about focusing on service. What does service mean to you now, outside the monarchy? Meghan let out a small laugh, shaking her head as if the question were beneath her. Gayle, it's obvious. Service is impact, not titles, something I've tried to explain for years. The fact people still need it to find shows how far behind society is. Her tone was cutting. Her body language closed. She leaned back, arms crossed, chin lifted. Gayle nodded slowly, acknowledging but pressing. I hear you, but some would say your books, documentaries, and interviews seem more focused on telling your personal story than serving others. How do you respond to that perception? Meghan's smirk returned. Perception is bias, Gayle. Those determined to see me as self-serving will never recognize the work. It's not my job to correct their ignorance, the audience murmured, shifting uncomfortably. Her words landed like slaps at Gayle. And at anyone who questioned her. Gayle's eyes flickered, but her voice stayed smooth. I understand, Meghan. Let's talk specifics. Your new project, how does it differ from previous initiatives? Meghan waved a hand, as if brushing away something minor. It's not about being different. It's about building on the legacy I've already created. Honestly, these questions feel redundant. My record speaks for itself. A quiet gasp rippled through the studio. Meghan hadn't just dismissed the question sheet, dismissed Gayle. For a long second, Gayle simply looked at her, pressing her lips together and taking a deliberate breath. She had been patient, professional, and empathetic, but Meghan's arrogance had tipped into disrespect. Still, Gayle tried once more to steady the tone. Meghan, I think our viewers appreciate details. They want to understand not just what you're doing, but why. Can you share an example? Meghan rolled her eyes subtly, but enough for the cameras to catch. Gayle, with all due respect, I didn't come here to recite bullet points like a press release. If people are truly interested, they can read about it on our website. I don't need to spoon-feed information. The audience gasped audibly. Gayle's hand tightened around her note cards, but her voice stayed calm. I see. Well, some might argue that when you appear on national television, the expectation is that you'll share those details directly with the public. That's part of accountability. Meghan leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing. Accountability. I've been held accountable every day of my life since I married into that family. If anything, I've been scrutinized far more than anyone else. So forgive me if I don't feel the need to bend over backward to satisfy critics who will never support me anyway. The dismissiveness was a spark in a room full of gasoline. Gayle sat straighter, her professional mask beginning to crack. Meghan, she said, firmer now. I'm not your critic. I'm doing my job. My viewers expect me to ask questions that matter. And frankly, your tone right now, she stopped, choosing restraint, doesn't make it easy for people to see the sincerity of your message. Meghan laughed again, cold, dismissive. Maybe that's because sincerity makes people uncomfortable. Gayle, maybe you and your viewers aren't ready for someone who refuses to play the game. The words sliced the air. The audience shifted. Some looked sympathetic to Gayle, others shocked at Meghan's audacity. Gayle set her notes down slowly, deliberately. For the first time, she locked eyes with Meghan and let a flash of irritation show. Meghan, no one's asking you to play a game. They're asking for respect. Respect for the questions. Respect for the audience. Respect for the platform you're using. Meghan smirked, her voice dripping superiority. And maybe, Gayle, respect should be mutual. The studio went dead silent. The tension was thick enough to cut. Gayle sat perfectly still, hands folded, the fire in her eyes betraying how near the breaking point was. She had tried patience. She had tried empathy. But Meghan's arrogance had become unbearable. The calm veneer of CBS Mornings was about to shatter. The storm that had been building since the first question was ready to break. And everyone in the studio felt it coming. The air in the CBS studio was electric, charged with a tension that could no longer be disguised. Meghan Markle sat with arms crossed, chin lifted as if presiding over the room rather than guesting in it. Gayle King, papers now resting untouched, leaned forward slightly. Her tone finally stripped of the careful gentleness she'd held all morning. Meghan, Gayle said, low but firm, you've made it clear you feel misunderstood, then attacked. But let me tell you something. Sitting here, the way you've spoken to me and to this audience, it doesn't read as strength. It reads as arrogance. The audience gasped. Meghan blinked rapidly, composure cracking. Excuse me, she snapped. Gayle held her gaze, steady and commanding. You've dismissed every question. You've rolled your eyes. You've implied that viewers at home are ignorant if they don't immediately agree with you. That's not the voice of a leader or a changemaker. That's the voice of a spoiled child who thinks the world owes her something. A shocked silence gripped the studio. Meghan's lips trembled. Her hand gripped the armrest. How dare you, no, Meghan? How dare you? Gayle cut in, her patience gone. How dare you come on this set, ask for a platform, and then insult the very people you claim to serve? How dare you cast yourself as a victim while dismissing every attempt at accountability as bias or conspiracy? You act as if the world is against you when, in truth, it has given you opportunities most can only dream of. Meghan's face flushed. Her eyes glistened. She tried to hold her posture, but Gayle's words hammered the carefully built walls of her composure. You talk about hating the monarchy, Gayle pressed, voice rising. And yet you cling to the Duchess title whenever it suits. You talk about service, but your projects are eclipsed by your own narrative. And let's be very clear. If you weren't married to Prince Harry, none of it would exist. Another gasp, louder this time. Meghan's breath caught. Gayle stood now, her voice carrying the full authority of decades in journalism. You act like you're still in the palace as if the world owes you deference because you were once part of that family. But here's the truth. You're not in the palace anymore. You're not above accountability. And right now, on this stage, you're not acting like a duchess. You're not acting like a petulant girl stamping her feet because she can't have her way. Meghan's eyes filled. Her hand moved to shield her face from the cameras. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Gayle said. Sharper now. This isn't about racism or protocols or mental health anymore. This is about jealousy. You wanted to be Kate and William. You wanted their respect, their popularity, their role. And when you realized you couldn't have it, you chose to burn the house down on your way out. A choked sob escaped Meghan. The words landed with devastating weight, piercing her armor. She stood suddenly. Her chair scraped across the studio floor. This is unacceptable, she stammered, tears streaming. I don't have to take this. Gayle stood firm, unflinching. Then don't. If you can't handle the questions everyone else is too afraid to ask, maybe you shouldn't be in that chair. Maybe stop pretending you want to serve others when it's clear you only want to serve yourself. Meghan grabbed her purse, shoulders shaking, and turned toward the exit. The cameras caught every trembling step, the tear-bright cheeks as she stormed off. The studio was silent except for the echo of her heels on the polished floor. The moment the door closed, the audience erupted into stunned whispers. Some looked at Gayle with admiration, others in shock, but no one could deny they'd witnessed a moment of television history. Gayle stood tall, voice calm once more as she faced the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, this is live television. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but it still matters. The director cut to commercial, but the damage and the legacy of that exchange was already sealed. Meghan Markle had come to promote a project and left in tears, her image bruised, her arrogance exposed. And Gayle King, who had tried so long to stay composed, had finally voiced what millions wanted to say. It was over. A routine morning show turned into one of broadcast history's most explosive clashes. Meghan walked off in tears, and Gayle's words echoed across the media world. Now it's your turn. Was Gayle right to call her out? Or did she go too far? Share your thoughts below. If you want more dramatic showdowns like this, like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a moment.